Welcome to C-Files, folks. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell notification if you like this content. I'm not doing Hebrews in this video. That's coming within the next, either tonight or tomorrow, the book of Hebrews. I'm doing the situation in the Middle East in this video. Now, look, I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm not a professional journalist. I didn't go to journalism school, and I never broke into video or television journalism. I'm not going to try to do something I'm not trained on how to do and try to pretend like I'm Mr. Somebody, giving the news. I could care less about that. I'm not interested in that. Now, it's probably disconcerting to professional journalists who have spent their life trying to do that a bunch of no names who have no training in journalism come on social media platforms and actually outdo them in doing the news. And it's just because most journalists today are bought and paid for, and they can't really do real journalism. But if they could, a lot of them would do really well, I'm sure. But let's get an update here, what's happening in the Middle East, and I'm going to discuss it from a biblical viewpoint, because that's what I'm good at. I'm good at two things. I'm good at looking at the world that we live in today from a biblical viewpoint, and I'm good at certain things in government. I've been in government since I was 19 years old, and I just got appointed to a position by my local city council here, and so I'm still in government. I've never really left government. So this is what God had for my life. Now, also did 3 years of study in a Bible Institute. Have spent my life studying Scripture. Spent my life on all of these theology books, philosophy books, history books, science books, all this stuff back here. So let's get started. So what's happening up to this point? Well, we know that this whole thing started on October 7th with what I consider to be a false flag attack, or false flag event. And people lost their lives in that event. It stirred people up and started the situation in the Gaza Strip. Then Israel attacked the embassy in Damascus, the Iranian embassy in Damascus. And that started the conflict with Iran. Attacking an embassy is the same as attacking a country. You might as well just hit Tehran as to hit an embassy, because it's the same thing. Now, here's what happened in retaliation starting yesterday from Iran. Iran sent 170 drones, 120 ballistic missiles, 130 cruise missiles, carrying a combination carrying a combined 60 tons of explosive material into Israel. So Iran violated Iraqi and Jordanian airspace in order to do that. Israel and its allies, including the United States, shot down 99% of the Iranian munitions. The attack caused minor damage to Nevatim Air Base in southern Israel, and one young girl from a Bedouin town in the south was hospitalized for severe shrapnel injuries. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted on X, "We intercept it, we thwart it, together we will win." Israel and its allies reportedly viewed the event as a win. We'll talk about that in a moment. The G7 condemned Iran's direct and unprecedented attack against Israel. We'll talk about that one too. And warning of an uncontrollable regional escalation. Bear with me, folks. We'll get to it. I know some of you sitting on the edge of your seat on this wanting to comment. Iran threatened attacks on U.S. bases in the Mideast if Washington joins in any counteroffensive. We'll talk about their capabilities there. De-escalation. The Israeli War Cabinet voted to, quote, exact a price from Iran in a manner and at a time that is right, end quote, but not immediately, according to U.S. officials. And this is a quote from U.S. National U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby. He said, "We don't want to see this escalate. We're not looking for a wider war with Iran." All right, so this is Zero Hedge, and on X, Israel said to strike back on Iran in next 24 to 48 hours. That was posted at 1:18 p.m. on April the 14th. This was posted by Conflict Live. Breaking. Israeli channel 14 reports that Israel's war cabinet has decided to launch an attack on Iran tonight. We don't know what that's going to look like, but so far it has been an air war. Moments after those headlines hit, there was a report from Yeshiva World News, Moshe Schwartz indicating, quote, an immediate response with strikes within Iran was approved by a clear majority of the Israeli War Cabinet, but was called off at the last minute following Biden/Netanyahu phone call. War Cabinet still supports the planned response, but not necessarily immediately. So called off temporarily. So we don't know when that attack will occur. This is Moshe Schwartz on X. Says an immediate response with strikes within Iran was approved by a clear majority of the Israeli War Cabinet, but was called off at the last minute following Biden-Netanyahu phone call. The War Cabinet still supports the planned response, but not necessarily immediate, so that's the actual post. And these headlines. Israel has made clear to us it is not looking for significant escalation with Iran, senior U.S. administration official. U.S. has been in contact with Iran via Swiss channel. And that's from official source, apparently. This is all on Zero Hedge, if you want to look it up. Meanwhile, earlier, the U.S. declared it would not participate in any counterattack against Iran. Quote, we don't seek a war with Iran. We're not looking for escalation here, White House National Security spokesman John Kirby told NBC on Sunday. Even earlier, President Biden discussed the evolving conflict between Iran and Israel in a meeting of the Group of Seven to coordinate a united diplomatic response to Iran's brazen attack. Iran told the U.S. earlier today that if it supports Israel's counterattack, expect its military bases in the Middle East to be attacked with missiles and suicide drones. So Zero Hedge. To sum up, U.S. officials say Israel isn't looking for an escalation with Iran. And it says silver lining is that the constant Iran-Israeli headlines will shake out 99% of all the cubic zirconium hands. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Because Biden's handlers will allow a regional war to send oil to $150 6 months before the election. And if there was any retaliation strike against Iran by Israel, the U.S. would not be joining. So that's what we have so far. Interesting. We're in an election year, and this breaks out. Go figure. Okay, so what's going on here? What does all this mean? What's happening? I'm trying to figure out how to do this without this being a super long video, because the history behind all of this goes far beyond October 7th, way back far beyond the formation of Israel in 1948, the Balfour Declaration, and way back beyond the Holocaust of World War II. And it goes all the way back to the 1800s to a thing called the East India Trading Company. Now, the East India Trading Company was the forerunner to what today we call the globalist or the New World Order. And this is the same New World Order that President Bush 41, the first President Bush, the President Bush elder, if you will, spoke of so often in his speeches. He often spoke of the New World Order. And it's funny that the news media denies the existence of a New World Order when one of their favorite presidents spoke about it. Okay, one of their own spoke about it. One of their globalist buddies spoke about it. Excuse me. The East India Trading Company, which operated out of the United Kingdom and mainly operated in India, because of their policies in India in the 1800s, they caused, through their policies, the Opium Wars in China. And the reason for that was, you guessed it, where's my wallet? Right there. They did it for money. How many lives have been lost? How many lives have been expended off of this planet into eternity for the love of money? The number is as the sand of the seas, the sand on the beaches. The love of money is truly the root of all evil, as the scripture tells us. So it was for the love of money that the Opium Wars occurred in China. The East India Trading Company and their partners made a lot of money off of that. They made a lot of money in their policies in India. And of course, the revolt in India by Gandhi and so forth was a revolt against the East India Trading Company and their policies via the British government. There are 3 locations that developed out of the East India Company into what we now call the World Economic Forum, the New World Order, and the globalist. 3 locations developed that were major hubs, or should we say central locations, capitals, if you will, if you want to use that terminology, for the operation of this globalist agenda that came out of the 1800s. And those are the City of London versus London. Well, London is the bigger metropolitan area. The City of London is a smaller area where the globalists operate out of inside of London. Washington, D.C. is a major hub of these policies that came out of the East India Trading Company, and as they developed along over time. And then Israel is the third hub. So there's the triangle, right? You have London, Washington, D.C., and Israel, all always connected together. And in this conflict that we have in the Middle East right now, what do you have? Who are the allies to Israel right now? Well, the UK, the United States, France has jumped into it, and Israel. Who's on the other side? Russia and Iran, and who knows if Turkey might end up jumping into this at some point. But right now it's Russia and Iran. All right. So there's your drawing. There's your lines of demarcation. Okay. There's your war. There's your no man's line. How would you want to call it? No, remember it had the no man's territory. I was just reading a text that came in on my phone. No man's territory in World War One, where that was that gap between the German and the British and American armies and French armies. So these wars were the product of these globalists. The East India Trading Company, London, Washington, D.C., Israel. Most of these wars, Israel wasn't involved in the earlier ones, but they're obviously involved now. So you have World War I, or the Great War, as they called it at the time. Well, how did that one get started? Well, the globalists started it. And then out of World War I, grew World War II, and a thing called the Tavistock Institute. The Tavistock Institute was the psychological warfare propaganda branch of the globalist empire. Okay, so the Tavistock Institute, since the end of World War II till today, has been the premier psychological warfare developer when it comes to propaganda and all of that. They developed the propaganda, and they've done a lot of heavy study and experimentation when it comes to psychological warfare. And so they use it really, really effectively. All right, so now what's one of the things they use to start these wars? Because the globalists, they make money on both sides. Like right now, I'll guarantee you they're a globalist funding Iran, and they're a globalist funding Israel. They're funding both sides of the war because what they want the war to heat up and get going and carry on for a period of time. It's not, we have a short war, there's a decisive victory, and everybody goes on about their business. It's these wars today carry on forever. They never end. And the reason is because the longer the war can go, the more money you can make on the war. And to make money on the building up the production of missiles, tanks, ships, that kind of thing. And they do it for both sides. And this is the globalist game plan. This is how they play the game. So, so that's that part of it. Now, I guarantee you the Tavistock Institute has plenty of psychological warfare techniques that they're using in the mainstream media right now concerning this situation in the Middle East. All right, so we know the incident occurred on October 7, which was the original spark. One of the things that the globalists do is they'll use false flag events. All right, let me name a few false flag events which got us into some wars. Pearl Harbor, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, 9/11, and now October 7 in Israel. So there's four false flag events for you right there. And we're talking about the major. There's smaller false flag events that occur, but these are the major ones. These are the big ones. And they're designed for the purpose of starting these wars and, they can if you will, kill two birds with one stone, accomplish two things in one shot, and that is depopulation, the attrition of lives lost in the war, and the making of a ton of money. The love of money through and the human sacrifice in wars is the crux of the religion of the globalist. They love bloodshed and they love money. They love, because money brings power, right? They want to control that. So we find ourselves once again in a situation where another false flag event occurs, and now it's building up, and here we go. All right, so that's a little bit of history. Now, then that history is not complete, but it's the best I could do on a short run. All right, so we're up to today. What's going on now? Well, now everything is escalating. The United States said it didn't want to escalate, but Israel has different plans. Israel wants to escalate. They have retaliated against Iran. So think about this. False flag operation on October 7th gets them into Gaza, slaughtering a whole bunch of people in Gaza. Then Israel attacks, because Israel's blaming Hamas for their false flag event, even though they held back for a long time before they sent their military in. Why? Why would they do that? Well, there's only one reason. It's a false flag event. It was intended to be that way. That's only Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is the best explanation. Well, that's the simplest explanation given the history of the globalists and how they operate. Now, so we had that incident, and then Gaza, and then the attack on the embassy in Damascus. So Israel walks up to Iran and goes, boom, and punches Iran in the nose. And Iran's going, oh, what the heck? You just punched me in the nose. My nose is bleeding. What? Okay, fine. Boom, Iran punches back. It's when Iran punches back that the cops come around the corner, and they don't see the initial punch that Israel does to Iran. They see the punch that Iran gives to Israel, and the cops go after Iran. You're under arrest for battery. Well, but he hit me first. Whoa. Hands go behind the back, right? This is a metaphor of basically what's happened. The world's mad at Iran, blaming Iran for attacking Israel, but everybody seems to forget that Israel threw the first punch and socked Iran in the nose by hitting their embassy. So here we go. Tavistock Institute, psychological warfare propaganda, rewriting the narrative has already begun. They're really good at it. So this is where we find ourselves right now. And it's escalating. So apparently Israel has pulled back temporarily because the United States, the Biden administration, apparently, whoever is actually running the show there, wanted them to pull back and say, no, we don't want you attacking. We want to settle this down. Because the United States, obviously somebody in the Biden administration still has some active brain cells in their head. And because somebody was thinking, and they're going, you know what, it's probably not a good idea that the Middle East blow up right now and us get involved in it. You think? Somebody still has a brain in their head. Not a good idea at all. It is claimed that Iran has missiles in South America pointed at the United States, and they have the ability to hit every major city in the United States. The only area that from the word that's being put out, I can't verify this, that may not be reachable would be from Northern California up to Canada along the West Coast. So, but everything else is fair game. I don't know if we have an Iron Dome the way Israel does, and they're able to knock out all of these missiles coming in. So Iran has threatened and said, United States, you attack us or you get involved, we're going to attack you in your mainland. So that's the missile side of it. And so far, it's all been an air war, no land war yet. But what else? What other assets does Iran have in the United States? Well, how about those millions of immigrants, quote unquote, quote, immigrants, unquote, coming across our southern border? I wonder how many of them would be an asset to Iran and how much damage they could cause in the United States, in our mainland. So they have bargaining power, Iran does, with Washington. So somebody in Washington, D.C., who has a brain cell in their head, may have said, you know what, we don't want to escalate this because we don't want to have to deal with that situation. And that could have been what started putting the brakes on a lot of this. What's going to happen tomorrow? I don't know. What's going to happen tonight? I don't know. It could still escalate because Israel's not backing down. Israel wants to. Israel's looking for a fight, man. Israel's like poking everybody, poking their neighbors, looking for a fight. They've attacked Gaza. They've attacked Lebanon. They've attacked Iran. I mean, they're really, really working hard to try and get something stirred up in the Middle East. All right. Now, what about the biblical view of this? Because I know the Christians, my fellow Christians, are going to be wanting to know about that. Is this to fulfill a fulfillment of prophecy? No, it's not. Is this Gog and Magog? No, it's not. Not even close. So, I gotta plug something in real quick. Battery's about to die. Bear with me, folks. Okay, there it goes. No, it's not. And let me read to you. There, a lot of people, a lot of Bible prophecy experts, so-called, are saying that Gog and Magog out of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is Russia. It's Russia and Iran. Okay, that is incorrect. That's not what it is. And I know that the prophecy gurus have insisted that's the case. And the fact that Russia and Iran are leagued right now and coming down and getting into a fight with Israel, to them, that's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. They would see that as a fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39. Let me read you a little something, because this is the best way to do it when it comes to that. So, writing in 1940, I'm sorry for that, folks, my little thing there. Been battling lunch lately. Anyway, writing in 1940, Louis S. Bauman told his readers, "No modern nation is set forth so vividly in the prophetic word as is Russia. Probably the reason is that the Eternal, looking down across the sands of time, beheld Russia as no other nation, raising her mighty fist and hissing her defiance." Bauman is not alone in explaining the role Russia supposedly plays in Bible prophecy. The 20th century is replete with books and articles assuring readers that Russia is clearly mentioned in the Bible. It's not. Stay with me. Nearly every modern day prophecy book comes to the same conclusion. Russia is Ezekiel's Gog, with its leader being the Prince of Rosh. Tim LaHaye claims to know that Ezekiel 38 and 39 can only mean modern day Russia because of etymology, that is, by studying the origin of words. The Hebrew word Rosh, R-O-S-H, found in Ezekiel 38, 2 through 3, and 39, 1, is said to be a people group that refers to Russia. You're about to find out why that is incorrect. H.L. Ellison has described this view as an excellent example of the wish being the father to the thought. As we will see, there is no nation or people group named Rosh mentioned in the Bible. Uh-oh. In order to link Ezekiel's use of Rosh with a modern nation, many prophecy writers appealed to the great lexicographer, big word, lexicographer, Wilhelm Gesenius, 1786 to 1842. Gesenius. Got it. Gesenius. Hooked on phonics. Now, this guy, it identifies Rosh as a northern nation mentioned with Tubal and Meshish, undoubtedly the Russians. Well, it sounds so far like this is that prophecy occurring in the Middle East today, doesn't it? Read on. Following Gesenius, Clyde E. Billington, oh good, a name I can pronounce, devotes 3 long articles to a defense of the Russia thesis. He admits, however, that in searching for the Rush people in ancient documents, one must keep in mind that the name Rush could be and was spelled in a variety of ways in the ancient world. As James Price points out, the name Rosh was even pronounced differently and spelled differently in the various Semitic languages used in the ancient Middle East. Of course, none of this means that Ezekiel's use of Rosh has anything to do with these claims. We must ask how the Bible is using Rosh. Billington believes he has found a trace of Rosh hidden in the word Tyros. It's T-I-R-A-S, Tyros. That appears in Genesis chapter 10, verse 2. Genesis chapter 10, verse 2. Quote, the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Mesheth and Tiras. End quote. See if you can follow Billington's argument and then ask yourself whether his line of reasoning follows a plain sense interpretive methodology. Quote, the name Rosh is probably derived from the name Tiras mentioned in Genesis 2:10, or 10:2, must be dyslexia. Mentioned in Genesis 10:2, I keep wanting to reverse those numbers. The change in the name Tiras to the name Rosh or Rash, R-A-S-H, may be the result of a quirk of the Akkadian language. The Akkadian language tends either to drop the initial T sound in a proper name or to change an initial T sound into an S sound. Sometimes an initial T sound on a proper name was changed in Akkadian to an S sound. What has all this got to do with the price of tea in China? We're about to find out. The Akkadian tendency To drop or to change an initial T sound in a name seems to have been especially strong if the initial T was followed by an R sound. And the name Tyros fits this pattern perfectly. End quote. Did that make sense to any of you? It didn't to me. So now Bible students must learn Akkadian. So, we got Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, and now we got Akkadian. Must learn Akkadian to interpret Ezekiel 38, 2 through 3, and 39, 1, and rely on a quirk of what the Akkadian language tends to do only sometimes, based on a tendency that seems to take place whereby presto, changeo, Tyros turns into Ros, which morphs into Rosh, which then becomes Rasu, Resu, Rasi, and finally Russia. This is as bad as the Russia hoax. Inconceivable. It is the proverbial blind guide who strains out a gnat after swallowing a camel, Matthew 23:24. If Tyros became Rosh over time, as Billington and others claim, why is Tyros still used in 1 Chronicles 1:5? Keep in mind that 1 and 2 Chronicles, or 1st and 2nd Chronicles, were written no earlier than 538 BC, around the time Ezekiel's prophecy was composed. Second, Chronicles 36, 22 through 23 is most definitely post-exilic, post-exile, since it repeats what is written in Ezra 1. Some scholars argue for an even later date. Let's get down to it. If Ezekiel was using Rosh to identify Tyros, that's a far stretch, then it seems reasonable to assume that 1 Corinthians would have done the same to have it comport to Ezekiel's use of Rosh if a people group was in view. The fact is, since all the nations listed in Ezekiel 38 and 39 are found elsewhere in the Bible, did you catch that? All the nations listed in Ezekiel 38 and 39 are found elsewhere in the Bible. They existed at the time that the prophecy was given. Uh-oh. And a nation named Rosh is not. This seems to be strong evidence that Rosh is not being used to identify a nation or people group within the biblical context. So it's not Russia. Ron Rhodes, who believes Rosh is a reference to modern-day Russia, makes my point when he writes, quote, certainly it would be logical to find some form of the word Rosh in Genesis 10 because all the other nations in Ezekiel 38, 1 through 6 are found there. End quote. So he admits it. It would be logical to find, okay, that disrupted me. It would be logical to find it if Rosh were a nation revealed by Ezekiel, revealed to Ezekiel by God. But Rosh isn't found in Genesis 10. No matter how much of the Akkadian language we apply to Tyros to make it read Rush, Victor P. Hamilton links Tyros with the Turasha of Egyptian texts, that is, the Trahinians, or later the Etruscans of Italy. If this is true, then it's hardly possible that Tiras is an early spelling of Rosh, or Rosh, if Rosh is to be identified with modern-day Russia. And so he goes on and he makes a very, very strong argument, because that took up a lot of time. In this book, The Gog and Magog End Time Alliance, Israel, Russia, Syria, and the Bible, Prophecy by Gary DeMar, he makes a very, very strong argument that saying that Russia and Iran are Gog and Magog of Ezekiel 38-39, that is false. A very strong argument. Gog, the term God doesn't connect to Russia in any form, fashion. Who does it connect to? It connects to a man, and that man is this. Let me read down here. If you don't have to be a biblical scholar to figure this out. It's all in the pages of Scripture. The people living in these nations were alive and well and living in proximity to Israel in Ezekiel's day, and that is Tarshish, Tubal, Meshish, Beth Togarmah, Dedan, Judah, and the land of Israel. Those were the ones mentioned. The people living in these nations were alive and well and living in proximity to Israel in Ezekiel's day. There is no question about this claim. There is no way to refute it except to create an alternative future with new nation names, and helicopters and jets and cruise missiles and drones and tanks, which are not mentioned anywhere in Ezekiel 38 and 39. They fought with horses and chariots and crossbows, swords and spears. No modern weaponry. So, to maintain that the nations that will attack Israel are nations in our day is not allowing the Bible to speak for itself. To seek the fulfillment in the dark region of the end of the days, Ernest Hengstenberg writes, is the least possible because most of the nations named either no longer exist or are no longer heathen. Magog, Gomer, Meshish, and Tubal, Phut, Sheba, and Dedan are no more to be found on any modern map. Ezekiel's prophecy is about the protection of Jewish people in his day, not ours. Without the restoration and rescue of Israel after the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities, there could be no Redeemer. See Revelation 12, 1-6. If Israel had suffered annihilation at the hands of Gog, then God's redemptive plan would have been thwarted. According to Ezekiel's prophecy, God rescues Israel so the promised Redeemer, Jesus the Messiah, would be born. Jesus makes it clear that he is the focus of the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy and all prophecy. Quote, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, end quote, Revelation 19:10. Quote, then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, Jesus explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures, end quote, Luke 24:27. Ultimately, the prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and 39 is about Jesus and how the Christ-centered genealogy continued forward so it would read at the time of Jesus' birth. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom Jesus was born, who is called the Messiah. If Gog, Haman, had been successful in his day, now long past, the Jewish people would have been wiped off the face of the earth, and the world would be a very different place. As it is, God controls history, and God controlled the enemy of his people. So Gog is a reference to Haman Gog. Haman Gog is Haman. The same Haman in the book of Esther that had it out for Mordecai. That Haman. That is Gog. And that Haman was taken down by God, and so were the armies that he ordered to go after Israel. That was the battle of Gog and Magog. Fought with horses, swords, spears, chariots, and bows and arrows. So, I do not believe for half a second that anything happening in the Middle East today has anything to do with Bible prophecy. For me to develop that further, it would take way too long, and this video would be way too long. Do your own research. Get these books and read them. Get The Last Days Madness by Gary DeMar and read it. Get Before Jerusalem Fell by Kenneth Gentry and read it. Get these. You're going to have to study, folks. Not just sit and watch videos and think you know everything. Get books like The Committee of 300 to learn the earlier history that I gave you. Get books on the Tavistock Institute. Read them. These are real history. And they'll help you to understand what's happening in the world today. Now, where do we go from here? Well, if we go the way the globalists want to go, we're going to have a world war. Bottom line. We will have World War III. They'll pull as many nations as they can into it and create as much bloodshed as they can and become as super rich as they can off of the war. Hopefully, cooler heads will prevail and they'll back off. And they'll know and understand and recognize that this is a globalist agenda, that they're playing these nations for the fool, and that they'll back off and say, okay, we're gonna come to the negotiation table, and we're not going to have this bloodshed. Hopefully, that's where we go. Could this be God's judgment upon Israel for her modern day idolatry and rejection of the Messiah? It could be. But I don't know if that's the case. So, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Now, I'm not a fan of the government of Israel. I'm not a fan of the government of Iran. I'm not a fan of, frankly, a whole lot of the governments in nations around the world, because most of them are idolatrous. Most of them they're either Islam, right, which is idolatrous because they reject the Messiah and they're worshiping a false god, therefore that's idolatry. Or Israel, who has rejected the Messiah, modern day Israel, and they're worshiping a false God, or they're atheistic. That's idolatry, right? Or they're globalist, worshiping themselves. They make themselves to be gods, and that's idolatry. So London, the government of the UK, filled with idolatry. Washington, D.C., filled with idolatry. Israel, filled with idolatry. Iran, filled with idolatry. We can say the same about France and Russia. I mean, maybe to a lesser degree, but there's going to be some in there. So this World War III could very well be the world war of the idolaters, all fighting each other. The solution is Jesus Christ, and recognizing that the seed of Abraham is not modern day Israel. The seed of Abraham is the church, the bride of Christ. And I'll leave you with this. Who's a Jew? According to Scripture. Romans 2:28 and 29. For he is not a Jew which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. Being a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob does not make you a Jew. Not in the new covenant. That's what my series on Hebrews is about. What makes you a Jew in today's covenant, the new covenant, is being in Jesus Christ. That's circumcision of the heart. Thanks for watching. I'm not going to go any further because it's too long already. I hope this has been helpful. Remember to like and subscribe. If you like this content, hit that bell notification. And God bless you. We'll see you next time on the C-Files.